Over the course of the year, I've been so impressed with the senior speeches. They've all been amazing, and you've created some pretty tough competition to follow. I thought about Quinn's opening, asking what we needed right now, and then his hilarious story and outstanding presentation. I thought about Hunter's cooking lesson. It was so professionally done, and I learned something about him that I didn't know. I thought about Sammy's childhood memories of Bell Hill and imagining herself as a Suffield student one day. Most poignantly, she got emotional when she spoke. Why? Because when you're a senior, or anyone standing at this podium, you realize that your words are real. This is your truth. Time has flown by at an amazing rate, and there's no important exercise than reflecting on your own life. Throughout the year, we've heard heartfelt tributes to brothers, sisters, mothers, fathers, and friends. And it's in that spirit that I speak to you today. My father passed away this winter, and I don't tell you that to make you sad, because he had a long and a glorious life. But it makes me think about my childhood and childhood memories and what made him special in my life. From both he and my mother, I developed a love of reading. Our childhood routine was to have dinner, take a tub, often with more than one child in the tub, pick a book, and then snuggle down in a bed for story time. One of my brothers often picked Mike Mulligan and his steam shovel, the other Where the Wild Things Are, and frankly, that book scared me a little bit. And I most often picked Dory and the Blue Witch. I was sent Dory books by my aunt, my father's sister, who we didn't know that well because she lived in exotic places throughout the world. She lived in Zambia, Morocco, Thailand, and Nepal. However, she never forgot our birthdays, and she always sent us really cool stuff from where she was living. I think the Dory books originated from her time when she was living in London. Thinking back, I'm not so sure why I love the character Dory so much, and the Blue Witch book especially. The books are simplistic, yet beautifully written, with a poetic repetition of sentences. Down, down, down the stairs went Dory, and Gink went with her. Each book in the series, and it is a whole series, begins the same way. This is Dory. She is a witch, a little witch. Her hat is always on crooked, and her stockings never match. I think somehow Dory was my kindred spirit. She always tries her best, but she's the smallest, so no one listens to her. No one pays attention to her. And largely through her solo efforts and her perseverance, she fixes everything and saves the day. So what I ask for you now is to power down, breathe deeply, relax, and become Dory with me for a few minutes. So here's the book, Dory and the Blue Witch. This is Dory. She's a witch, a little witch. Her hat is always on crooked, and her stockings never match. On Friday, Dory's mother came rushing down the stairs with her black cloak flapping and her best boots on. "May I come?" asked Dory. "No," said the big witch. "I have to go to a very important meeting. Mildred the witch is back, so you need to be a good girl and stay right here." "Well, who's Mildred the witch?" asked Dory. The big witch frowned. "She's a bad witch, and I don't have time to explain now. So you just stay right here and be good. Cook went to borrow a cup of sugar, and she'll be home in a few minutes." "Come on, Gink," said Dory to her cat. "We'll have a tea party all by ourselves in the parlor. I'll be the big witch, and you can be me." Dory went out into the kitchen, and she poured a saucer of milk for Gink and a glass of milk for herself. She put some cookies on a plate, and then she put everything on a tray and carried it to the parlor. Just then, there was a knock at the front door, a very loud knock. "Well, that's Cook," said Dory. "We'll invite her to our tea party." Dory ran and opened the front door. "Come in," said Dory. A witch dressed all in blue swished through the door, slammed it shut, and locked it. "Well, my mother isn't home," said Dory, "and I'm having a tea party in the parlor. Would you like to sit down and have some tea? It's milk. The Blue Witch frowned, and blue sparks flew out of her hat. "Get your cloak, little girl, and get ready to leave. You're coming with me." "Well, my name is Dory," said Dory very politely, "and I'm sorry, but I can't go anywhere. My mother said so." The Blue Witch stamped her foot. "Get ready this minute," screamed the Blue Witch. "Well, I'm hungry, so I'll just finish my milk and cookies first." The Blue Witch waved her arms in the air and blue sparks flew across the room. "Oh, all right," snapped the Blue Witch, "but hurry up about it." Dory went into the parlor and sat down. The witch followed her. Dory took a few bites of cookie and then a swallow of milk. The Blue Witch was stamping around the room, pulling the curtains and looking out and then muttering to herself. The Blue Witch glared at Dory. "You're as slow as a snail. Run and bring me some of those cookies and a glass of milk, and be quick about it. We've got a long trip ahead of us." So Dory ran into the kitchen, and Gink went with her. "Oh my," said Dory, "I don't like that Blue Witch, and I don't want to go anywhere with her." Dory looked around. "Gink, Cook has all sorts of stuff in the cupboards. I bet she has something that would fix a witch." So Dory opened the cupboards and looked inside. There were all kinds of thinners and thickeners and stretchers and stickers, and between the button glue and the stretching salts was a little bottle full of shrinking powder. Blue sparks were coming down the hall and into the kitchen and making circles around Dory. "Oh my," said Dory, as the sparks swirled around her faster and faster. "I hope this works." And she dumped the shrinking powder into the glass of milk, and she put it on the tray beside some cookies, and then she put the empty bottle in her pocket. Dory hurried into the parlor. "Here you are," said Dory very politely. The Blue Witch grabbed the tray and frowned at Dory. "It's about time. Now get your cloak this minute, or I'll turn you into a turtle." "Oh my goodness," said Dory, and she ran upstairs, and Gink went with her. Dory looked in her closet. Her cloak wasn't there. Dory looked behind the door, and she looked in the dresser drawers, but her cloak wasn't there. Dory looked under her bed. Her cloak wasn't there either. "Oh my, where did I leave my cloak?" She looked out into the hall, and the air was full of blue sparks. "Hurry up or I'll go up there and get you," shrieked the Blue Witch. "I'll be down in a minute," said Dory. I can't find my cloak." "You get down here before I count to 10, the Blue Witch yelled. Dory looked and looked, but she still couldn't find her cloak. Dory tiptoed out into the hall, and she peeked over the banister, and the Blue Witch was counting to 10. The Blue Witch was counting slower and slower, because with every count, she was growing smaller and smaller. Dory shut her eyes, and she hung on to the banister very tightly. "Oh, I hope she doesn't stop shrinking." 10, came a tiny voice from the hall below. Dory opened her eyes and looked down. "Oh, Gink, it worked." The Blue Witch was only a few inches high, but the smaller she got, the madder she got. She was hopping around the hall with a cloud of tiny blue sparks around her and shaking her fist at Dory. Dory put her arms around Gink and sat down on the steps. "Well, we'll just stay here and see how small she gets," said Dory. The Blue Witch was shrinking so fast now that she wasn't much bigger than a bee, and the cloud of blue sparks was growing smaller and smaller too. Dory moved down a few steps. Then she moved down a few more. She did not like the way the sparks spun around or the way the Blue Witch was shaking her fists and hopping up and down. Suddenly, Dory had an idea. "I wish I had the fly spray," she said to Gink. "I bet that would keep her still." Then Dory had another idea. "Come on, Gink. I know something better than fly spray." Dory ran down the hall to her mother's room, and she reached up and got a bottle of the Big Witch's perfume. "This will keep her quiet." Dory walked slowly down the stairs toward the Blue Witch, and Gink went with her. Dory leaned over the banister and sprayed perfume on the Blue Witch. Slowly, the sparks died away, and the Blue Witch was sitting on the carpet, holding her head. "I bet she bites," said Dory. So Dory reached into her pocket, and she took out the shrinking powder bottle and a small piece of paper. She slid the paper under the Blue Witch and popped her into the little bottle and put the top on very quickly. Dory put the bottle with the witch in it back in her pocket. Now, maybe we can finish our tea party. So Dory turned on the light in the parlor and sat down and ate her cookies and drank her milk. Gink lapped up his saucer of milk, and the Dory put the glasses and the plates on her tray, and she took them back into the kitchen. Dory looked out the window. I wonder what happened to Cook. Dory heard a strange buzzing noise, like a bee, and she looked around, and she didn't see anything. Dory went into the parlor. The buzzing was getting louder, and her pocket felt hot. Oh, said Dory, reaching into her pocket and pulling out the bottle. It's that blue witch. Dory held the bottle under the light and looked at it. The blue witch was shooting blue sparks again, and she was so angry that she was buzzing around and around inside the bottle, trying to get out. I'm glad I can't hear you, because I don't think you're very nice at all, and I don't want to be turned into a turtle just because I can't remember where I left my cloak, said Dory. The tiny blue witch buzzed louder and shook her fists. Gink, I think we better put this witch someplace safe. What if I dropped the bottle and she got out? Dory looked around, and she looked at the piano. That's a good place. So she lifted the lid of the piano and she put the bottle with the witch inside of it. She slammed the lid and then she piled books on top. Then Dory sat in a chair with a book and looked at the pictures. Suddenly, there was a loud rapping at the door. I'm going to pretend that I don't hear it. I've used up all the shrinking powder on the first witch. The knocking was louder and louder, and Dory could hear someone shouting. And then there was a rapping at the window. Dory jumped out of the chair and ran up the stairs, and Gink went with her. I'm tired of pretending that I'm a big witch, said Dory, and she crawled under her mother's bed. With a crash, the front door was flung open. Dory, Cook, it's Mother! Dory ran downstairs. The big witch frowned. Mildred escaped, and Cook didn't open the door, and when you didn't open the door, I didn't know what had happened. What do I smell? Dory looked up at her mother. Well, it's perfume, and Cook didn't come home, and I didn't answer the door because I did once, and it was a blue witch, and she wasn't polite at all. The big witch looked very strange and very pale. Mildred was here? Yes. Is she a blue witch? The blue witch nodded. Well, you should have told me. I wouldn't have asked her in for tea. The big witch sat down on the stairs and held her head. Dory, said the blue witch, where is the blue witch now? And Dory led her mother into the parlor and pointed to the piano with the books piled up on top. Well, she's in there, and I don't think you better let her out. The big witch frowned. Mildred wouldn't fit in there. Well, I shrank her first, and then I put her in a bottle and I put the cap on tight. But she was so mad I thought she might swell up and pop the top off and then fall off the table. Oh, said the big witch, so you put her into the piano. That is a very good place. It will do fine for the moment. Now come along, and we have to find out what Mildred did with Cook. And Dory and Gink followed the big witch up the stairs and up the stairs to the tower. And they went into the secret room where the big witch made magic. The big witch opened the door to her secret closet and got out the crystal ball. She dusted it off and she looked into it. Is Cook there? Asked Dory. The big witch nodded. Mildred has turned her into a cup of sugar, but before I turn her back into Cook again, I must banish Mildred. The witches all agreed that whoever caught her must banish her. Dory watched the big witch, mix up magic in the big black cauldron. The big witch frowned and stirred and waved and muttered. A cloud of blue sparks swirled over the cauldron and circled and then vanished out the window. The big witch poured more magic into a bottle. Come along, Dory, said the big witch. Now we'll go get Cook. And down, down, down the stairs they went and into the kitchen. There was a cup of sugar on the kitchen table, and the big witch took the bottle of magic and sprinkled it over the sugar. Suddenly, Cook was standing in the middle of the kitchen, pointing to the cup of sugar and frowning. Who spilled sugar all over my clean floor? Shouted Cook. And Dory and the big witch laughed and laughed. And the next night, all the witches had a party for Dory, and they gave her a little gold cauldron that said, To Dory first prize for witch catching. And Dory kept it on the table beside her bed with the little empty bottle that she'd use to catch the Blue Witch. So what was your favorite childhood book? I want you to revisit the joy it gave you and cherish those memories. Find peace and calm in the best memories of your childhood. And be Dory. Push through. Do what you need to do and figure it out, even if your hat is always on crooked and your stockings never match. Have a lovely afternoon.